never talking loud, and you know plenty. You know what I'm talking about, cause you just get me. Yeah, you so pretty. If everything is dipped in gold, then baby it will never grow. Everything sweet ain't sugar-coated. What a lie.
Diminishing the difficulties of one skin tone to elevate and exalt the experiences of another skin tone is never healthy, because two things can be true at the same time and two truths can exist at once. Light-skinned people's experience did not have to be easy to be able to acknowledge that dark-skinned people's experience is valid and was hurtful and difficult as well. Just because trauma or difficulties in life may look different or may even be unseen does not mean they don't exist. So how can we be more equitable in the ways that we talk about skin tone dynamics within the Afro-descendant community? Let's get into it.
Random people get on this app and call me Patrick Beverly every day. Bro, it's funny, bro. I kind of look like that nigga. I'm 31. I was dark-skinned in the 2000s. I was an African booty scratcher. Somebody making fun of your name? Somebody making fun of your name? It really is that deep. No, it's that deep to y'all on TikTok in 2026.
You know, this brings me to a point. I kind of understand why light-skinned niggas got that title, was just like soft. Because niggas never really like... When y'all grew up, niggas really never had too much to say to y'all. What, like light bright and soft ass nigga? High yellow ass nigga? Other than that, ain't nobody really ever like... Wasn't that much to say about you for real. But if you was dark-skinned, early 2000s... Oh my god, nigga. Hey, it was a fight every day, verbally. This is probably why I can't take when people be on this bitch getting like super duper offended and always be like, bro, this is TikTok. This is social media. I've heard worse in real life, nigga. It's like this whole wave of people loving dark-skinned people, I don't know where the fuck that came from. I don't know where the fuck that came from. Because growing up, y'all treated the dark-skinned community like horrible ass stepchilds. Nigga, it was roast wars every day. And you only had 3 options. Shut the fuck up and get bullied, talk shit back, or laugh it the fuck off. Obviously, as you see the way I talk on here, I was one of them niggas that was talking shit back. But niggas knew not to go too far with me, because I was a fighter growing up. I ain't gonna lie. Like, I was real live whooping ass back in my day. Like, real live whooping ass. Like, that's what I was known for growing up. I was whooping ass so bad to the point where it used to be new motherfuckers that transfer into school. And you know, I guess it used to be like an ego pride thing. Niggas always try certain people in the school, I guess, to prove themselves or some shit. I don't know. CPS schooling system was damn near like the jail, if we want to be honest. You gotta try to come for a motherfucker so other motherfuckers don't fuck with you. I was whooping ass to the point where niggas, the security guard would tell that nigga, leave him alone. You don't want those type of problems, bro. I promise you. That ain't what you want. Leave that nigga alone. But the concept of being talked about as a dark-skinned person, it resonates in our mind is like very mild. That shit does no damage. I promise you. I be looking at the comments sometimes, people trying to talk shit and I be laughing my ass off. But when it comes to the light-skinned community, I can understand why some of them be like ready to like do it to your ass. Because they never really experienced the full effect of getting like seriously roasted on to a certain degree. Like, I feel like everybody got talked about. But with being dark-skinned though, we talking about being dark-skinned. That's a different experience of getting talked about. But what do I know? I'm just a nigga who lift weights. Have a good day.
So I wanted to do some commentary on this video I saw on TikTok. So I guess it was this brown skin dude responding to this other dude that I would categorize as brown skin, but he is on the darker spectrum of brown skin. But anyway, responding to his video, and I'm not sure what the context of the conversation was, but the dude, the darker skinned brown skin dude, we'll just call him dark skin for the sake of this conversation, but I don't really consider that dude dark skin. I just wanted to put that out there. But for the sake of this video, he can be dark skin. So the dark skin dude was basically talking about that it was difficult for him in the 2000s because people would make jokes about his color as well as his name, or about his ethnicity, I think it was. And then this brown skin dude, that's, well, I'm assuming Black American. I think the other dude is not, but I'm not sure. So then the brown skin dude responds and says, you know, XYZ, basically light skinned dudes didn't have it as hard in the 2000s, so they didn't really go through stuff because it wasn't as many insults that you could say about him. And I wanted to go over this because I've seen that meme going around that saying, oh, being dark skinned was like being black in the 1930s. And although I know it's a joke, and I do kind of understand the point of what they're trying to say, because I do agree that there was a lot more normalized disrespect towards darker skinned people during that time. And I'm going to call it that because that's what I observed a lot. It was a lot of banter. It was a lot of nitpicking. It was like, negging, making fun of. That's what I remember by the 2000s. And I think that it's important to point this out because I do think colorism and anti-dark skin sentiments, that's the term I like to use, because people have kind of conflated colorism and that's kind of been like at this point gentrified low-key. So I like to call them anti-dark skin sentiments that connect to anti-African sentiments, but we're gonna get to that. So a lot of these anti-dark skin sentiments were very prevalent in the late 90s, early 2000s, whether it be sitcoms in black cinema, just like commentary, different sayings that people were still saying at that time, or different stereotypes put on women or men based on their skin tone. And I also like that at that time there was a diversity of aesthetics when it came to black people, and I feel like that is what's really missing today. Not only is there, yes, it's not as much diversity phenotype wise, but it's also not as much aesthetic diversity either. There's not different like styles and vibes of black people. It's like this new money hood rich type of situation going on, and that's like kind of dominating. That's all you see. And I think that a lot of that is because there's been a shift from TV and really even like desktop internet to mostly like social media. That's where a lot of black culture exists, and so who's controlling the imagery is different now. But anyway, that's a conversation for a different day.
I would also appreciate if you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are not already and the content resonates with you. Welcome, as well as making sure you hit the bell for notifications so you'll be informed every time I upload a new video or go live. I'd also encourage you to check out my Patreon, where you can access old and exclusive content, as well as having early access to new uploads. That will be linked in the description box below.
But anyway, my point in bringing all that up is essentially millennials and older Gen Z saying, oh, being dark skinned was like being black in the 1930s is essentially a complete over exaggeration, especially when a lot of y'all just sit up there and agree with Tichina Arnold that what Martin was doing wasn't a big deal, because that was a lot of what was going on in the 90s and 2000s. Let's be real. Like, y'all know. And then when social media and the internet got really popular, people were just doing it on there, and it also depersonalized the conversation. So people would say crazy stuff about mostly dark-skinned women, and they would be trying to make a joke. It was usually all veiled under the guise of a joke. And so I think that that's why when people watch Martin today, they might feel polarized or feel like he's doing too much. But like I said in my Martin video, it's a time capsule of the time. But yeah, to pretend like there was all this mass discrimination going on and nobody was showing any love to dark-skinned people, and that's not necessarily true either. I think that it's nuanced. As we always say, it's a really nuanced conversation. But let's be real here. Millennials and Gen Z are over-exaggerating a lot of this, because I'm not going to say over-exaggerating in the sense that trying to downplay what people have experienced, but people making jokes on the internet is not at all the same as living in Jim Crow South in the 30s, where there's one-drop rules going on. And that's kind of interesting to me too. Like, people complain about the one-drop rule, but then they're also saying like, oh, it was like being black in the 1930s. Like, do you actually know what it was like being black in the 1930s? I don't think y'all do. And the irony of using that as an example, when most of the colorism that millennials and Gen Z has experienced and engaged with in a public sphere, I'm not talking about what people got going on in their families or their households, or, what your grandparents who got color issues said. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about on a cultural public level, what was happening on social media and in school, things like that. So that's another kind of conflation from reality as well. Like, living under a system of white supremacy is not at all as the same as your brown skinned homeboy cracking jokes on you as a dark skinned dude. You know what I mean? And of course, I know it's a joke and I'm like reading into the meme too much, but I'm just saying it's interesting how quickly people jump to like overinflating how negative their experience with colorism was, when for a long time, if you ask people about colorism or try to talk about it, and I'm saying this as somebody who's been talking about colorism long before it was popular or socially acceptable to do so. I've been talking about texturism and anti-blackness and the issues with, blanqueamiento and stuff like that, and anti-blackness in the Latin community. I've been talking about that stuff long before it was popular to do on social media or just in general. But anyway, when you were bringing this up before, people would gaslight, gatekeep, and girl boss and claim that you're better or claim that you have the complexes and all this type of stuff. And I understand that's a trauma response. But it is also interesting that now that it's a mainstream conversation and it's acceptable, now it's like, oh my God, yeah, it was so hard for us. But it's like, okay, but who was the people saying this stuff though? Like, these people did not disappear. Like, and people are allowed to change and evolve, but we also need to be honest. Like, y'all act like these colorist forces come in the black community and like run out and leave like they're gnomes that disappear like a thief in the night. And it's like, no, this is a community dynamic, and just pretending like those jokes didn't happen and just moving on with life doesn't completely solve the problem. So anyway, moving on to how the brown skinned dude in the video brought up light skinned men and said like, oh, something along the lines of light skinned men are soft because in the 2000s they didn't really go through bullying like that, so that's why they're not as rough as brown skinned and dark skinned men. That's basically what he was implying. And that was like such a weird escalation to me, because I felt like light skinned men shouldn't have even have like been brought up in the conversation. Like, the first dude didn't even say anything about that. So I just found it strange that he brought light skinned men up in it. And I noticed this a lot, where if people are discussing the experiences that dark skinned people are having currently or had in the past, all of a sudden people bring that up to contrast with how light skinned people have it so good. And that is exactly my issue with the light skin privilege talking point, because it's like y'all are making implications and assuming what our experience is, assuming that we're having it easier, assuming we're not struggling. Y'all don't know this for a fact. You're not walking in our shoes. Even if you have a parent or a sibling or something that's light skinned and you maybe see what they experience, you still have not experienced that yourself. So and you can't even trust these light skinned apologists because they lie so much and will ignore all this disrespect. So just because it seems like to you like these things are not happening, or light skinned men didn't go through things, like, I mean, it was just a weird thing to bring up. And I just think that it's not cool to use our experience as a contrast and say, oh, y'all didn't go through XYZ, you didn't have it as hard, when there's no way to prove that. And it's like, all you have to do is talk about your experience. You don't even have to bring light-skinned people into it. And it's just a way to like invalidate us when we didn't even have anything to do with the conversation. Like, people was agreeing with what he said, but when you bring up light-skinned men into it, it's just kind of strange. Like, why are they even on your mind? Like, mind you, his logic behind why he believes this is colorist stereotypes rooted in these ideas that being light or white or whatever is more feminine, so it makes you more soft. Like, that's literally the narrative that he's upholding. And we know why black men hold on to these narratives. I feel like this whole narrative about light skinned men being soft, this is very organically something black men came up with, I believe. And I believe that they enforce this narrative because I do think that in general, brown skin and dark skin men and women, I think some of them, if they're not if they haven't completely dealt with the color thing, I do think that sometimes they do try to find ways to like downplay or diminish light skinned people just in general. So I think that that's a part of it. But I also believe that black men do feel insecure when it comes to the looks thing with light skinned men. So if they call them feminine and say, oh, well, that's not even a real man anyway, it's, if you feel insecure and you're threatened about your masculinity and you feel like your form of black masculinity, you're insecure about that or whatever, and then you see, who's an attractive, non-problematic light-skinned dude I can bring up, I'm lost for one. Let's just say, okay, you see a dude, okay, he's light-skinned or whatever, and you feel like looks-wise more girls will go for him, even if you don't even know, you're going to automatically try to put out things to make him look bad. And I'm sorry, but brown skin and dark skin women do the same thing. Like, they be saying light skin women are hoes, or trying to be like, oh, she not even cute, she's just light skin, trying to downplay our looks. And this kind of gives me the same vibe when brown skin and dark skin men say that light skin men are soft. Like, it just gives me the same energy. Oh, right. Comparing based on skin tone. Yeah, collectively, black women have never fucking did that. Yeah, were there times in history where maybe there was a certain aesthetic or certain skin tone promoted or getting a lot of attention more? Yes, that's true. But then simultaneously at that same era, you can find numerous other black men of opposite skin tones being praised and elevated at the same time. It's not the same thing for black women. And to pretend like that's not the truth is a complete rewriting of history, as y'all like to do.
And this whole narrative of black women taking to the internet saying, oh, I need to have a dark skinned man, I only want a dark skinned man, XYZ, that's relatively new. And it's something that's probably trendy within the last 10 years. Because when I was little, I remember girls saying, oh, I want to have a baby with a light skinned dude so my baby can have light eyes and loose hair. That's what I remember. So funny how the narrative switches so quickly. So in my opinion, black men worshipers, they're very obsessed with what's trendy and what's mainstream. So they're just going along with who's being promoted at the moment. I don't even really take them seriously because let's be real, their standards are not that high. As long as you show up male and of African descent, they don't really have that many standards. So, and we see that based on reality. Like, look at these celebrities. Like, these women are the top black women in the world. Look at the low class males they choose. So this narrative that brown skin and dark skin and even some light skin men are trying to push, that they're being so discriminated against because of their skin tone and it's so hard for them, and oh my gosh, these disrespectful black girls, like, sir, pack it up. Because, like, yeah, honestly, when you scale all of the thousands of, well, I'm not gonna say thousands, but hundreds of years of black men worship to five chicks making comments on TikTok, it's like, I'm sorry, but I can't feel bad for you. Because it's just like, if you haven't made some shake with the patriarchal system you live in, that's a you problem. That's not on me.
And that's not me downplaying any anti-blackness men of African descent be experiencing now or as little boys. I'm not saying that, but I'm sorry, it's hard for me to pity them when it comes to the color dynamic, when it comes and them of any shade when it comes to the color dynamic, because you literally got Gen X black men still on YouTube coming into my comment section still complaining about I'll Be Sure and Shamir Moore. We're in the big year of 2026. They're still on here complaining about Christopher Williams. So the moral is they could not handle being treated the way that they treat black women. They could not handle it. They would freaking melt. They be on crying because people are holding Chris Brown accountable, talking about they're attacking the black man. Ain't nobody attacking Chris Brown. Chris Brown should have been dealt with, and if he had been held accountable years ago, he wouldn't have even spiraled out like this. Like, what the hell? So a lot of black men's issues is simply when you hold the mirror to their face, to their actions. That's when a lot of them get triggered. But yeah, the point is that they would never be able to handle being treated the way that they treat black women. They could never handle it. They would melt, and they damn sure wouldn't be sitting around talking about women that look like them in their preference. They definitely wouldn't. So yeah, anyway, but I always found that funny, and that's why I don't really have a lot of like patience or empathy, because it's like, first of all, as a man, you shouldn't even be hyper fixated in matters of color anyway. Like, let's start there, because if you was worrying about that green, okay, you won't be worried about what bitches was saying on the internet, because you would know that it's all lip service and women do a lot of talking. So who cares anyway? I'm not saying like that in a misogynistic way. I'm just being honest with you. Like, it's the same thing. When I hear black men worshipers trying to divide black men up by color, I pretty much ignore that, because it's like, yeah, but y'all support Chris Brown though. So it's like, you can say whatever about your preference right here on Instagram. The stats say you still like Blueface and Chris Brown, so somebody's lying. Like, so yeah, I don't really believe that the black man worship has any skin tone. I think that a lot of that is just triangulation and trying to play brown skin and dark skin men, because they know that brown skin and dark skin men have self-esteem issues. And I will say, I do think that light skinned black men and mixed men have better self-esteem about their looks on average, but I feel like that's even kind of a stereotype too, because a lot of brown skin dark skin men don't have complexes about the way they look. I feel like that's kind of more of a rare thing for men, and there's usually other problems going on that are being expressed maybe through color issues, or they came from a family that had color issues or something like that. You know what I mean? It's just a little bit more complicated with men when it comes to color. And I actually want to do some more content about this, because I found a study about this recently. And my point of bringing all of that up is basically saying that, like, I don't think that there's any logical reason for black men to be trying to diminish light-skinned men based on their looks, because black men really shouldn't even have desirability complexes based on their skin tone and color, because that's not really something that's reinforced in our community. Like, or were there times that there are people that were, you know, colorist towards little brown skin and dark skin boys? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that they never experienced color based discrimination or anything like that, but there's really no reason for them to be going out of their way to reinforce this narrative that light equals feminine and soft and dark equals masculine, other than the fact that it benefits them personally. They don't care about women that look like them and how they feel about that, but because they have a fetish for light skin. And I think that it's important to point that out. So you have to wonder, if you're by your actions showing that you have a fetish for light-skinned women, and you're sitting up here calling light-skinned men pretty, you're saying that they're feminine, you're saying that they can't defend themselves, that they, all this type of stuff, and I just gotta look at that kind of sideways. And that's why when these you know, Stefan Diggs types of situations happen, and you look at their roster of baby mamas, to me, like, I see everything I need to know. And people can think like, oh, I'm oversimplifying or I'm making assumptions, but I'm sorry, as a light-skinned woman who has taken the rose color, well, let me not even say taking the rose color glasses off, because them shits was never on for me to begin with, to be fucking for real. But as a light-skinned woman who was never brainwashed or never bought into black men worship, I guess I'll say that, I always thought it was something weird to that. And I always thought that there was some weird sexuality, angry masculine type of energy there that just never sat right with me. And I think that people should look into that a little bit more. And I know that this dude was just making like a TikTok jokey joke, but another thing that irritates me is when people make comments like, oh, well, because light-skinned people maybe didn't go through color-based discrimination as children, that means you didn't really go through things, or you had it easy, or you're soft and things. And adjusted adults know that that's a complete oversimplification of how life happens, but you still have people who kind of operate with that same belief system. And I think that there are people who still internalize that and still project that onto light-skinned people and still like view our experience in that way. And that's why a lot of people don't think our voice is valid in the skin tone dynamic conversation. They think we need to just sit back and listen, and they also want to dismiss everything as privilege. And really, the privilege narrative is a strongman argument to shut down the conversation so people don't hear light-skinned people's perspective and don't add any nuance. And the reason why I believe that is because, let's be real here, if light-skinned people were to be honest about their experience, it would show that brown skin and dark skin people's internalized colorism is also affecting light skin people and other brown skin and dark skin people as well, because there's just not as many light skin people. So a light skin person can be colorist all day. I don't understand how that affects the black community if most people are brown skin and dark skin. Like, and mind you, if you're the only person who's acting like that, most likely wouldn't that person be shunned? So I just always find it weird how people make it seem like, oh, there are these elusive colorists coming in and doing all of these things, and it's like, no, this is coming largely from people who look like the same people they're talking bad about. Like, you know, you're like triangulating light skinned people in the dynamic when they might have nothing to do with it, but then simultaneously turning around and saying, oh, well, you don't even experience things, you don't even go through it that bad. And it's like, you don't know what that light skinned pretty boy was dealing with at their house. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know if they had a creepy uncle, you don't know if they had you don't know if they had a Stefan Diggs big cousin, you know, God forbid, you know, I'm just saying. But it's like, you don't know what be going on in people's lives. You know, what I find very interesting is that historically and even presently, light-skinned and mixed people usually are the product of a pretty traumatic or dysfunctional situation, or at least an unorthodox situation, and do have to go through difficult dynamics as children that maybe a lot of people don't understand. And that quote unquote nuance is never added. So just because the struggle or the trauma looks different than what you're used to seeing or what you would assume that that person went through doesn't mean that it isn't equally as impactful. You know, like, I feel that way when I say that about biracial people, and they're like, oh, you know, you'll never have it as hard as dark skinned black women or XYZ. And it's like, okay, what if this person has a family member or, is in a community where there are people that weren't as accepting, or they're having to deal with constant microaggressions, or, just the mental spasm of living in a place where you're the only Afro descendant person and you're having to navigate that. Like, why is that not a valid, difficult experience or a valid anti-black trauma? Why is one experience, elevated and the other one undermined, when it's both trauma that's rooted in racial experiences, mostly connected to anti-blackness? So I just didn't like that either. And that constant implication is why we're in the situation today. So yeah, he's just one dude, he probably didn't mean any harm by that, and I don't think it was that serious. But this is why that narrative that, oh, light-skinned people didn't have it as hard in slavery, light-skinned people didn't have it as hard in the 2000s, light-skinned people didn't, constantly reinforcing that biracial people don't have it as hard as dark-skinned black women. That's not productive or healthy to either group, and it's not even true. Like, there are brown skin and dark skin people who never grew up with colorism, and they didn't experience colorism until they became an adult. They grew up with families that loved and embraced their skin color and their hair texture and informed them, and they didn't start dealing with that until they had to interact with self-hating black males. I know plenty of brown skin and dark skin women who didn't have to engage with colorism or anti-blackness until well into their college or adult years, or probably high school. That's usually when black girls have those experiences. But my point is that not everybody is working with that foundation of not having self-assurance or having to find love in blackness. Not everybody has that background. Even myself, I don't really have that experience. My family really affirmed me and really educated me about history in North America as well as Latin America and the Caribbean. So I was very affirmed, but that didn't shield me from texturism or anti-blackness or misogyny and things like that. And at the end of the day, your kid lives in a society that is a white supremacist society. Like, you can spend all day affirming them with all the Afrocentric 90s books and movies and all that type of stuff. That's not going to excuse the fact that you're still living in a Paris Hilton Y2K world, like, and kids want to be trendy and want to be cool. And that I can start to wrap up the video now, but I was going to say, like, kids are very vain. Like, kids want to be aligned with seen as cool, rich, popular, in fashion, in vogue. They don't want to be necessarily associated with what's alternative when you're in elementary school and high school. You want to fit in like everybody else, and that's natural. And I think that also connects to some of this, like, oh, it was really hard for dark skinned people in the 2000s thing. A lot of us were kids in middle school, high school, elementary school, and kids are very vain and mean, and kids will make comments about skin color and hair and things like that. I know a lot of my experiences came from other kids as a kid. As an adult, my issues kind of change, and that's actually how it usually happens for light skinned people. And even a lot of the studies that I've even read some of them on my channel. I'll have them linked. I'll try to remember to link them somewhere. But I've constantly read that as children, dark-skinned people deal with a lot of internalized colorism and skin color problems. But as they get older, they're gaining their confidence. People are becoming less ignorant. They're being more educated. They're seeing the beauty and the value of blackness and dark skin. So the perspective starts to change as they get older. But for mixed and light-skinned people, especially for mixed people, things don't necessarily get easier, and that's been proven a lot. So I think that is really interesting. And I'm not saying that things automatically get easier for dark skin and brown skin people either, because it's also proven how the colorism thing affects desirability. So that's a real aspect. And as an adult, you're going to be looking for a partner. As a kid, you're not really thinking about that stuff. So yeah, again, it's balance and valid critiques and valid concerns on both sides. But yeah, I think that's really interesting that they're constantly reinforcing the narrative that light-skinned people don't experience XYZ or have it easier, when the studies show that things actually either consistently stay pretty difficult or stay as is, or the problems change for mixed and light-skinned people, as where for brown skin and dark skin people, over time they get more affirmed, they get more confidence, and they get how do I say, the society around them begins to change with how they interact with them as they get older. That's not to say that that doesn't happen with light-skinned people, but things get really complex when you're mixed and as an adult. And I can even say personally, like, I've spoken about how most of my complexes as a kid came from my hair, but I didn't really start to feel passionate about the skin tone dynamics or like mixedness or like Afro-Latino-ness and things like that. I didn't really start to get really passionate about that stuff until I became an adult and got in the workforce and started to interact with people from other areas and different countries and states and things like that. That's when I started to really see what people were talking about with the whole mix thing. But as a child, I really didn't think about my race or skin tone or ethnicities or quote unquote being mixed. I didn't really see myself in that way. And I think a lot of light skin people and mixed people experience that. But then as you get older, you're forced to confront those things about yourself. But of course, get in the comment section. Let me know what you thought about this video. If you are a light-skinned man, what is your perspective on the comments that this dude made? Do you relate to what I'm talking about? Of course, I'm not a light-skinned man, so I mean, I can only give my like observational perspectives. So I'd like to hear you guys' experience. So get in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Thanks for all the support. Peace.